Now you can imagine why everybody hated these tax collectors. They were considered the slime balls, the lowest of the low. And if Matthew is sitting out at a tax collector booth, it's likely that as people walk by, there are sneers and raised eyebrows, maybe some mean words that get sent his way. My guess is that Matthew, lived in a kind of a world of tension where he kind of liked being rich, but he kind of hated what he was doing to his own countrymen. I wonder if he was kind of sitting there in emotional no man's land when the disciples walk up to the booth. They probably gave him the eye. They probably considered him a turncoat, a traitor, a reject. And then out of nowhere, Jesus comes up to him. And when I imagine this scene, I can't prove that this is true, but I imagine this scene, I just imagine Jesus putting his hands on the table, leaning over the tax collector booth and looking Matthew right in the eye and saying to him, "Follow me." Matthew sitting at the tax collector booth is like, Jesus, yeah, you. Because nobody's picking Matthew to be on their team. Nobody wants Matthew to be at their parties. Nobody's inviting Matthew to be a part of what they're doing on Saturday night. But Jesus comes straight up to Matthew. Now, had Matthew seen Jesus before? Did he come out of the blue? I think it's likely that Matthew had seen Jesus before. They were both in this small town where Jesus hung out called Capernaum. Matthew has a detailed explanation of what happened on the Sermon on the Mount. He's the only one who records it, which makes you think he may have been there on the scene writing this stuff down. Matthew writes details as though he was an eyewitness to things like the leper being healed or the roof bashers. So you just wonder if the disciples are the inner circle, and there's Matthew kind of hanging out on the fringe with his eye on Jesus. And I wonder if Jesus noticed him there on the fringe. And then he says, "Follow me." And Matthew, his heart is just elated. Because, to be picked for any team would have been great for Matthew. To get picked for this guy's team, who does miracles, this is the best thing in the world. And so an amazing thing happened in that moment. Matthew grabs his stuff and gets up and follows Jesus. Some of the commentators about this say that Matthew has structured Matthew chapter 8 and 9 very clearly with some escalating power. For example, Jesus goes and he heals the leper, and that's really, really cool to see a guy healed from leprosy. And then he takes that one step higher by 2 demon-possessed men get demons cast out of them. And the next story is not only is a paralytic healed, but also forgiveness of sins is brought. And then the most ridiculous miracle of all, that a tax collector would leave his booth and become a follower of Jesus. And that Jesus would welcome him into his family. I wonder if some of you might feel a little bit like Matthew today. Like you're showing up here at the church and you say, if people knew, if Jesus knew what was going on behind the scenes in my life, like if they knew that I was secretly addicted to prescription drugs, or if they knew about that awful thing that I did on Wednesday night, or the places I was surfing the internet just last night. If they knew the way that I treated my family this morning before I came to church, they wouldn't want me on the team. But the truth is that Jesus comes to you wherever you're at, whatever you've done, whatever tax collector booth you're sitting at, and he looks you in the eye and he says, "You, follow me." The invitation is there, not because you're good enough, not because your life is righteous enough, not because you've achieved something. It's because Jesus loves you, and he wants you to be on his team. And I think some of us just need to take a clue from Jesus in this passage. And we need to think, when Jesus goes around and he sees people, he doesn't write them off just because they're a tax collector. And oftentimes when we encounter people, our first response has to do with their occupation or their ethnicity or their station in life. And we have natural biases that just come out of the surface. But when Jesus sees people, the first thought is, that guy matters to God. And what if we had thousands of people at Christ Community Church who whoever we encountered, that cashier behind the Panera cash register stand, that guy sweeping the floors over there, our lawyer, our kids' soccer coach, that whoever we ran into, when we lock eyes with them, our first thought is, that person matters to God. And we wonder how we can be Jesus for that person.